So I moved to Debian Testing, sort of, because the distro I moved to is not Debian Testing, it is the beta for the latest Tuxedo OS, which is now based on Debian Testing instead of Ubuntu LTS. And in this video, I'll tell you all about why I think this is the best distro and model for my own use case at the very least, who it is for, and everything that they do around Debian Testing to make it more usable as a desktop. And this includes system snapshots, more packages, better CVE fixes, more backports, and some really interesting policies around packages, kernels, and all of that stuff. So we're gonna deep dive all of this right after this message from our sponsor, ProtonVPN. So you all know about Proton. They make Proton Mail, they make Proton Drive, Proton Pass, Proton Docs, and also, of course, ProtonVPN. You also all know why you need a VPN in your toolbox. At some point, you're gonna want to hide from your ISP what you're visiting, you're gonna be on an unsafe public network, and you don't want anyone to be able to view what you're actually visiting or prevent people from logging what you're visiting. A VPN is fantastic, and the one I use personally is ProtonVPN because it's fast, it is reliable, it is secure. You have a Linux client, you have clients for all your phones and tablets and whatever else. They have plenty of servers around the world, and of course it comes free as part of your free Proton account, even though, of course, if you want more features, faster speeds, and access to more servers, you can have a paid plan that will encompass your entire Proton suite. I use Proton every day, I love it, ProtonVPN is part of that, so as usual, if you're interested, the link is down in the description. So let's talk about Tuxedo OS first. So of course it is a Linux distribution made by Tuxedo Computers. They are a regular sponsor of the channel, but they did not sponsor this video specifically. They did send me the beta in advance, a week in advance before it was publicly available, and so that distro is the one they provide for their own hardware, but of course you can install it on any computer you want if you prefer. So the current version of Tuxedo OS, the stable one, is based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS with extra repos to give you drivers update a bit faster, some kernel updates, and theoretically the latest KDE Plasma version, except that's not really what you've been getting recently with Tuxedo OS stable. Because it turns out updating a desktop environment on top of an LTS base is not something you really want to do. Just ask KDE Neon what they feel about this. It is really difficult as the LTS ages to keep updating to a new version of a desktop, and the end result is not as stable, not as quick, and not as good as you'd like. Because if you try getting the latest KDE version on an LTS, you also need to update the versions of Qt that it relies upon, the KDE frameworks, and all other libraries that KDE depends upon. This will break other packages in your LTS base and repo, which need older versions, meaning you now have to update these packages too, and then the applications that depend on these packages, and the dependencies for these apps, and all the apps that depend on those dependencies. Basically, you have a little cascade of dependency updating, which means that at that point, you need to replace half of what's in your repos, and you might as well have made your own distro. Now, Tuxedo OS also has Ubuntu-specific issues. That issue, yes, the snaps. Because yeah, Tuxedo OS does not want to ship snaps. They prefer usual packages or Flatpaks, and removing all the snaps that Ubuntu packs in and making actual packages instead is annoying. And that trend is not stopping either, because Ubuntu is snapping up more and more of their core packages. They're replacing certain utilities with Rust-based versions. If you don't want that, then you either have to do a lot of extra work or you have to move to something else. They also cited the move towards AI that Ubuntu wants to make, and Tuxedo thinks this move is not transparent enough on what they want to do in the future with AI. So Tuxedo OS is moving away from the Ubuntu LTS base, and they're moving to a Debian Testing base, which is what the beta has in store. And it comes with a lot of cool stuff. You've got more up-to-date software, brtfs by default, system snapshots by default, with a GUI and integration into the bootloader. You've got packages for popular software by default in the repos. You've got faster CVE fixes, their own kernel, package, CVE policy on top of that. A lot of good stuff, so let's talk about it. So first, the base. It is Debian Testing. If you don't know what that is, which I doubt, but it never hurts to explain, Debian Testing is a rolling release that prepares for the next Debian stable version. Packages arrive first in Debian Unstable, which is the least stable version of Debian, and once they stay there for 2 to 10 days, they are moved to Debian Testing, meaning big issues can be caught before they arrive, security issues can be fixed, and you only get the latest updates after a few days, and some testing has occurred. On top of that, packages only arrive in testing if they do not break the install and if they don't introduce critical bugs either. Now, to be clear, Debian Testing is not a stable base in the sense of a fixed version distro. It is a rolling release, meaning sometimes you will get stuff that is a little bit more broken than on an Ubuntu LTS base, for example. But these updates are still tested, they're still vetted for critical problems and issues. Tuxedo OS has a mechanism to roll back in case something goes wrong, and on top of that you do get feature updates which you would never get on an Ubuntu LTS, which is very important for a lot of people and a lot of applications. Now the only issue with Debian Testing is, after testing is done, then this evolves into the next Debian stable, and then they start another testing version for the next Debian stable. Tuxedo OS will not stop at the stable Debian release. Once testing evolves into the next Debian stable, they will keep moving to the next testing version, and they'll keep using testing forever. This is what they call continuous Debian, because it is continuously updated. Now, why would that be a good system, and wouldn't it make the distro less reliable and less stable than the LTS base? We're gonna see. So the main benefit here is getting an up-to-date base that is not locked to super old versions of libraries and packages and apps. They can easily package the latest KDE version, some newer drivers and all of that stuff without risking destroying the LTS base, which is a big plus. On top of that, there's no giant rebase every 2 years when moving to a new LTS, which can be a pretty massive change, can cause plenty of problems too, because Ubuntu tests the upgrade path for Ubuntu specifically, not for derivatives. Any change you add on top of the LTS risks breaking the system with these massive version jumps. Even moving from an Ubuntu LTS to the next Ubuntu LTS causes massive problems sometimes, and here it won't be an issue for Tuxedo OS because the system is just continuously updated. It's a rolling release. And we'll see a little bit later that they also planned for more reliability and more solidity. Now, in terms of the repos, Tuxedo OS doesn't just give you packages straight from Debian Testing. They have their own mirrors, so they can release updates in a more controlled manner without dropping everything that testing might give you. Right now, in a week and a half of testing, I only got 2 days where I had updates, mostly Flatpaks, but a few system packages as well. Now, Tuxedo told me that it is normal because currently they're still doing manual syncs from Debian Testing's repos into their mirrors. In the future, of course, as the distro is no longer in beta, they will have automated sync, meaning you will get more updates than what I'm currently seeing. The Tuxedo mirrors also let them add security patches earlier than Debian Testing if they feel that it's necessary. If Debian Testing is taking a bit too long to fix a critical security issue, Tuxedo can add that fix to their own mirrors and distribute it faster. Debian Testing doesn't really do backports as a security guarantee because testing is just here to build the next Debian stable, so there's no potential urgency to fix issues. They do backports as a best effort kind of thing, so Tuxedo said that they will either create their own backports when necessary, or they'll use the Debian unstable fix if it exists and looks solid. They also have a CVE monitoring system in deployment for that new Tuxedo OS version to make sure that they're not missing out on anything critical. Now, as they say, they already had a system in place for this. They actually fixed a copy fail and dirty frag faster on Tuxedo OS than what Ubuntu LTS actually did, so they already had a system in place, but doing their own backports is also going to be easier on the Debian Testing base, because backporting a fix for a recent supported version of software is easier when your own version of that software is much closer to the supported one than what you would get in an LTS. If you have a 3-year-old kernel version, backporting a fix for the newest version is going to be trickier because the codebase might have changed significantly, and so adding that fix might involve completely changing the code around that and potentially breaking stuff. So it's not as simple as LTS is more secure, rolling releases aren't, because it all depends on how fast you are, how reactive you are, and generally backporting fixes is easier when your own version of software is closer to the one that got the official fix than if you used a very old version of that same software. Now, for their kernel, Tuxedo uses the Debian Testing kernel with additional patches. They add specific support for their own devices to that kernel for stuff that hasn't been upstreamed yet. They do try to upstream everything they can, but sometimes there's going to be a gap between what they have and what is actually in the kernel. They also say that they update the kernel's configuration itself to have a bit more performance, but they don't specify exactly what that is. I reached out to get more info on these sorts of changes. Now that is already a massive benefit in Tuxedo OS beta, because currently I've got the kernel 7.1, where the current stable version of Tuxedo OS, based on Ubuntu LTS, uses the kernel 6.17, which is damn old at that point, which means better performance, better drivers, better hardware support out of the box, right off the bat, is just massive. Having a newer kernel is almost always a good thing for most Linux users, but of course they also have an LTS kernel in the repo if you would prefer using that than the most recent one. And of course they keep updating the graphics drivers alongside the base, including NVIDIA ones, to make sure things are up to date even faster than on Debian Testing. As an example, they currently have the NVIDIA drivers 610 in their repos. At install, the beta came with 580, but I moved to 610 myself. Things are working well here. Mesa version seems to be at 26.1.5, so that's really up to date too. And the NVIDIA drivers also come pre-pinned by default when you install them, so you can stay stuck to a specific driver series instead of automatically being updated to the latest one if you don't want that. Now, if you still feel that this rolling base based on Debian Testing is too much of a moving target for you, well, Tuxedo OS has also thought of a solution for that. That's brtfs and system snapshots. Tuxedo OS defaults now to brtfs. You can use something else, but by default that's what they use, and they integrate that automatically with automated system snapshots. They use Snapper, which is a tool OpenSUSE developed a while back, and they create automatic snapshots before and after each system update. It is all done automatically for you in the background. You can actually see it working when you're updating using the command line. Snapshots are cleaned up automatically when they become too old, but in the meantime you can roll back to any snapshot you want if your system becomes broken or unstable. And all of these snapshots are available from the bootloader as well. You just need to restart your computer, pick the snapshot you want in the list of entries, and boot on that one, and it will restore it for you, meaning it is wholly integrated. You don't need a live system to access the snapshots, you don't need to have a working desktop to revert to one. It's all in the bootloader. Very, very easy to use. They also ship brtfs Assistant by default. That's a graphical utility that will let you view your snapshots, restore them or delete them, change the snapshot policy, or maintain the brtfs system with defragmentation, scrubbing, and balancing. It is all graphical, very easy to use. By default, they also use subvolumes, which are basically like mini partitions. They're not actual partitions on your disk, but they are directories that have their own hierarchy and can be accessed individually without accessing the entire file system. They can also be snapshotted individually, so you can restore just the parts of the system you need to restore by restoring the snapshot for a specific subvolume. Tuxedo OS creates one subvolume for /home, one for the entire root partition, and a few for subdirectories in /var, and they also of course use this for snapshots. In use, most people won't need to interact with that or won't notice it. You just restore a snapshot from the grub bootloader without worrying about anything, but if you're a more advanced user, you can of course change that config or interact with it. Now, do remember, snapshots are not backups. They're a solution to roll back to an earlier version, but they do not replace a good backup strategy. So even though you have brtfs snapshots on your system, you're not safe from data loss. You still need to back up your system on the side. Now, this is a very well integrated brtfs system here. You don't have anything to do manually. The default config is sane and useful. You can change it if you want to tweak things, but by default, you get system snapshots, automated, all accessible through Grub. Very few distros actually go that far for you, and I think that's really good here. So let's move on to my first impressions on that system after a week and a half. So I've used that system on my Tuxedo laptop, the Infinity Book Pro 16. It has an Intel CPU, an NVIDIA 4060 mobile, 32 gigs of RAM, and two 512 gigs SSD. Yes, I bought this laptop before the prices went absolutely nuts, so I still have my two kidneys, which is actually pretty cool. This thing has been my main editing machine for years now. Of course, you can also install Tuxedo OS beta on another computer than a Tuxedo computer. So the install was very easy. It's basically Calamares. There's nothing weird to it. The only notable change compared to the current version is the move to brtfs by default instead of ext4. You can pick something else, but I would recommend using it because that's how you get all the automated snapshots. Once I installed everything, I had FlatHub pre-configured by default on Tuxedo OS. I could install all my usual apps from there: QOneNotes, Joplin, Planify, Florp, Thunderbird, OBS, GIMP, Discord, Audacity. And of course, I could also install DaVinci Resolve, which was more of a pain to install than usual here because DaVinci Box, which is the solution I rely upon, could not work. I tried everything, did not manage to install Resolve, so I had to install it manually, but the installer is an old-ass app image that depends on libfuse2, which is not in the repos for Debian Testing, so I had to extract the app image manually and install from that extracted content. It was really annoying. Please, DaVinci Resolve, fix your packaging. It is an absolute mess. Make a Flatpak, make a recent app image, I don't care, but fix it. It sucks. I also moved to the NVIDIA driver 610 instead of the 580 version that they ship by default. I use the Tuxedo OS package for that. Why would you not want to use the latest NVIDIA drivers? They're already super far behind on Wayland, even with the most recent version, and in support for Linux gaming and various graphics APIs. So install the latest one if your graphics card supports it. So what I got is Plasma 6.7, the latest version. They have a minimal theme change with a few colors swap that I reverted because I prefer the default breeze look, or I also installed my Darkly theme, which is the one I prefer. You also get the default Plasma setup and layout, which I changed to have something that I prefer, and you have the kernel 7.1. They have their own version of Firefox that is pre-installed. It is shipped without the AI features, without telemetry, and without promotional content. It is also shipped as a dev. They also have Signal in the repos, and of course they could at some point add more applications there if needed. Every change is of course publicly available and open source. Now in my testing, almost everything was smooth sailing. Everything I published, the 2 previous videos before this one on the channel, all the daily Linux news and patroncast that I make for YouTube members and patrons, everything was done on Tuxedo OS beta without a hitch or any real serious issue. There were a few problems still. First, selecting my audio output to go through the HDMI cable was not available by default. It did not offer that option. It was either speakers or nothing. I had to use PAVU control, so pulse audio volume control, I think, to select the HDMI output as an available option, and then it worked and it stuck after a reboot. Don't know why it didn't show up by default. I also had a problem with NVIDIA On Demand, NVIDIA Only, or Intel Only. You don't have a setting for that by default. The previous version of Tuxedo OS let you right-click the Tuxedo Control Center and switch to the GPU you want or the hybrid graphics mode. Here it doesn't work, it doesn't exist, and I can't also right-click on an application in the KDE menu to select Run with the discrete GPU. I have to go edit the application, enter in the menu, and check that Run with dedicated GPU box that is in there. I asked Tuxedo about this. They told me that they're looking at how to integrate it. They will very likely just use the right-click menu option in KDE to launch apps using the discrete GPU, and they will probably just implement a ultra power saving mode that will basically just be Intel only or AMD only without the discrete GPU, automatically, something that you can decide to turn on if you prefer that. So they probably won't just offer a right-click way to switch between the discrete GPU, the integrated GPU, or hybrid graphics. They default to hybrid, and if you don't want hybrid mode, then you've got the ultra low power mode that disables the discrete GPU. I don't know if that's the best option there could be, but they're working on it. In the beta though, right now, this is not implemented. I of course had my issue with installing Resolve. I also had my usual issues that I have with every single Linux distro out there. My Apple layout keyboard just always inverts the @ and hashtag key with the greater than key, and I always have to run a command line to fix that. It never works on any Linux distro I know. If it's a Bluetooth Apple keyboard, the keys are swapped. I also couldn't change the SDDM settings, the login manager settings, to have my user log in automatically at first boot. After I rebooted the computers, then I could change those settings. I don't know why, probably a little beta problem. Now my second SSD is also only automatically mounted. If I type my password, I will have to change the mount option, so it's just mounted automatically all the time. And I had one issue that I don't generally encounter, which is the OBS Flatpak package had terrible performance in recording. I just could not hit 60 FPS consistently. I don't know why. Generally, the OBS Flatpak works much better for me than the repo version, but here is the repo version, which is very slightly older than the Flatpak by one minor version digit, but it is a little bit older, and this one worked much better for me. I have no idea why. Usually the Flatpak is better in my experience, but here it's not. So, who is Tuxedo OS good for, and why do I think it is probably the best distro, at least for me personally? Well, first, for KDE users, it's fantastic. It is the default desktop they ship. They will keep updating KDE Plasma on top of that base. But also, if you prefer other desktop environments, they are in the repos. You get the Debian Testing repos. So currently, if you want to install GNOME 50, you can. XFCE 420 is there, Cinnamon 6.6. This is something that is improved compared to the current version of Tuxedo OS based on Ubuntu LTS, where you will only get up-to-date Plasma desktops, and even then you are still a little bit behind, but other desktops are the ones from the repos of the LTS, meaning you use absolutely terrible old versions of them. So for desktop users, pretty good. You get up-to-date applications, FlatHub by default, up-to-date desktops, and all the reliability and solidity of those brtfs snapshots. For developers, pretty neat too. You get up-to-date versions of Docker, Podman, DistroBox, whatever you prefer for setting up your dev environment. You also get recent versions of development libraries. It's basically Debian Testing, which a lot of developers already use. It's better than an LTS generally because you don't need to add additional repos to get up-to-date developer tools. For business users, you get those snapshots that will give you peace of mind. You don't have to plan massive updates to a new LTS base every 2 years. The trade-off is the more regular system updates that you will get, which of course you can manage. You can set up update policies on every Linux distro and decide to have those updates only arrive once a week, once a month. You decide, you can even filter that with security updates or others. You can set up those policies. So for companies and businesses, this is probably pretty neat as well. And that's it. The experience has been really smooth for a week and a half. Do remember, it is still a beta. There might be bugs, there might be issues once the packages from Debian Testing floods in. Maybe I'll change my mind, but currently, on paper, and after a week and a half of use, it is the best distro model I used. It is a rolling release, but with packages that are held back just a teeny tiny bit for more testing. They have their own mirror, so they can slot in some security fixes if they need to, and fix the issues with Debian Testing, which is not necessarily meant to be used as a daily driver all the time. They also have their own applications that are in the repos for stuff that you wouldn't want to use as something other than a regular old distro package. They have those system snapshots. Everything feels designed for my own use case personally, and I actually really love that. And also I get all the stuff that I know and like. Apt for installing packages, I absolutely love this. I'm very used to this. I know this like the back of my hand. I get all the usual system utilities, systemd, and all of that stuff that I enjoy using, and that works for me. I get Grub and the snapshots. Wayland is still absolutely goated. KD Plasma is still the best desktop environment in my opinion. So everything is designed for me specifically, it looks like. In short, what you get is a rolling release, but more stable than something that would be bleeding edge, because Debian Testing doesn't just get every single update for everything, so you still get the benefit of new stuff, you still have Flatpak, but you're not bombarded with potentially unstable and untested updates all the time, which is great. You've got brtfs snapshots integrated right off the bat, nothing to configure, they work really well, that's fantastic. You get the latest KDE and very recent other desktop environments as well. It's just the best of all worlds in my opinion. You're not stuck to a fixed base that doesn't evolve until the next version comes out. You don't get a rolling release that constantly breaks stuff under you, although I might revise that opinion after more weeks and months with that beta. We'll see. I think it is fantastic, I really enjoy it, and I would encourage you to test it. Not on a production device, don't do as I did, use it on a spare device if you have one. So this will conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed listening to it, I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into how they handle things. The link to download the beta is in the description, and of course that's also underneath the video where you'll find all the usual YouTube buttons. Please do click on them if you enjoyed and you want to share the video, whatever else. You know why this is all important. You also have links to support the channel down there as well. Thank you all for watching, and I guess you'll hear me in the next one. Bye!